Charisma Quotient. I'm your host, Kim Seltzer, a dating and makeover expert, where I will help you build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. Do you often ask yourself, why am I attracting so many narcissists? What can I do to stop this? Many people feel as if they are narcissist magnets. I hear this a lot. If there's a person with a narcissistic personality disorder within 100 feet, they believe that somehow that person will be attracted to them. If it sounds familiar to you, obviously you're not alone. And no, not all men or all women are narcissists. It may feel that way, but I promise you there are more people out there. And it may not be that you attract more narcissists than other people, but you may be keeping them longer. So let me explain. Let's say you are looking for a new date or partner and you start swiping around your app and maybe you see that special someone in the bar and you land the date, and right away you find that person really attractive and witty and fun, and boom, there's instant chemistry and it feels amazing. And after a few dates, you notice that your new romantic interest needs to be attended to. Needs to be the center of attention, ignores your feelings or desires, and requires lots of reassurance about how great he or she is. So, you do not need to be able to diagnose a narcissist to be disturbed by this type of behavior. And at this point, many people who have even no knowledge of narcissism at all will politely disengage themselves from that person, because the trouble of catering to their new friends or dates' needs outweighs any possible benefits. So, what about you? Like, what do you do? Do you hang in there? Here's some questions to think about. Like, have you ever ended a relationship or date early because the other person was too selfish? Or do you have clear boundaries that you enforce about what types of behaviors you will or will not tolerate from a romantic partner? And if a relationship began wonderfully and quickly goes downhill, I call those tornado relationships, where it happens really fast, the chemistry is really strong, but then boom, it disappears, especially when the focus is back on you. Do you stay in it, hoping that it'll improve somehow or that you can fix it? Or you don't want it to fail, so you keep on going, right? Do you put up with being devalued? Do you make excuses for the other person's bad behavior? Oh, they don't really mean it, or oh, they had a hard day, or oh, he's not like that all of the time, or if the person's behavior turns abusive, do you leave immediately? Like, this is what I mean by, do you just like hang in there with that person? Or do you see these kinds of behaviors and nip it in the bud right away? And if any of the above seem to relate to you, you probably need to revisit your standards of what you will tolerate from a romantic partner. And this does not mean that you should never date people with narcissistic traits necessarily, but you do need to develop better strategies for sifting out those people whose bad behavior distresses you, and even more so, change the way you are on the date so that you don't attract them. See, to me, that's the empowerment. Again, you can't change the way that people are. All you can do is change your behavior and your detector to get a different result. And I truly believe that. Again, that's why I call myself a dating strategist more than anything else, because sometimes it takes a different strategy to break old habits. And you just may be in the habit of being that person. So, with me on the line today is a woman who has been with two narcissistic relationships back to back. Oh gosh. Okay, so she's done a ton of work and therapy. I know of her. I've known her for a couple of years and I love seeing her grow. But, she's kind of done the work and she's ready to date again. And she wants to figure out where her blind spots are so she can be more confident in choosing a good partner, be confident in herself, and break out of the narcissist magnet archetype once and for all. Well, let's see if I can help her at least crack the code in doing so. Welcome, Christina. Are you there?
I am here. Thank you so much.
Oh my God. It's so special to have you on. And I haven't talked to you in a long while, and I didn't know you were in these kind of narcissistic relationships. So I'd love to hear more. But first, maybe you want to share a little bit about who you are and, just a little background and also some of your dating stuff.
Okay, sure. So the Reader's Digest version, let's see. Oh gosh, I know. What can I say about that? No, so I was in the Army for 22 years. And one of the things I had struggled with initially when I was doing this work was finding that feminine and flirty side of myself and bringing that to dating, because I was in my masculine all the time. I had to be for my job. So I was attracting partners that were not necessarily right for me in that realm. And then I got out of the Army, and I really started to step into that femininity, and I felt comfortable with flirting. And I mean, the funny thing is, even when I was in the Army, I was all about pink dresses and Coach handbags. I could just never express that side of myself. So I buried it for a long time.
Aw.
So it was always there. But then so now I'm retired. I'm doing some other things with my life. They're just as intense, training for the Olympics, and I'm a veterinarian. I practice traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell, and sort of my journey. I've been in lots of relationships, some serious, some very short-lived. But the two that really stick out for me are my most two recent ones, and they were both narcissists. And again, I'm not a professional in that industry, in the mental health industry, but I didn't know what a narcissist was until I was in the middle of the first one, and this would have been in about 2016. And a friend of mine pointed out some things to me because I was talking to her, and she had this experience, and she used that word. And I was like, no, this guy is not a peacock. He's not a look at me kind of guy. He was more of a covert type. But I didn't understand the emotional abuse that was going on. And I was basically just accepting the behavior. So I broke up with him. It took a lot of strength and courage. The behavior had become abusive, and it was very insidious. So it's really easy when somebody hits you. It's really easy when somebody's verbally abusing you. It's not easy when someone is doing this over time, and they're breadcrumbing you. So there's really good stuff, and then they chuck in something bad, and your brain can't figure out what's going on and wants to default to the good things. So I had that experience, and there were tons of red flags from the beginning. I just didn't know how to recognize them. So I had this experience, and I decided to get a PhD in narcissism. I read, like we all do, right? I'm like, okay, Google, give me what you got, And so I researched everything I could think of, and I thought I had this down pat. I had, in that space, I broke up with him, and then I had a sustained a spinal cord injury in the Army. That's what actually caused my retirement early. And so I wasn't dating for a long time because I physically couldn't. I was recovering from all of that mess, and it took my body a long time to heal. And I had a lot of time to reflect. So that's why I was like, wow, I have all this time to sit here and understand this personality disorder. And I felt really confident that I had made the right decision in ending that relationship, because it wasn't going to go anywhere. And I caught him cheating. So that was a deal breaker right there. So even if he wasn't a narcissist and I was wrong about all of that, the cheating was already a deal breaker. So that was done. So I felt empowered in that, and it always kind of stuck with me. And I thought, okay, I am never going to get into this situation again. I know what I'm looking for. I'm not going to attract one of these. And so I took some time off of dating, and then I moved. I started completely fresh, whole new life, whole new city, everything. And I was ready to hit the dating world. And I dated over the summer. This would have been in 2019. So I had a huge gap. So almost a 3-year gap before I actually dated. And then I met another man in August of 2019, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, and this was after a summer of really, really awful dates, Match.com dates, just not what I was looking for. And it was kind of like, wow, this one is so different. And he stuck out. He's the pack runner. And I was like, wow, this is what an actual relationship is supposed to look like. Well, that's not what happened.
Mm.
And I even, in retrospect, I even questioned myself at the beginning. And this is common if you've been in a narcissistic relationship, you question, is this person a narcissist too? So I was in that space.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this seems too good to be true. I was looking for this person to be a narcissist. And it turns out that he was. And this one was way worse. The I would say the emotional and mental and even financial abuse in this one was so much worse than the first one. And I'm sitting there kicking myself, going, how did I get into this again? And I'm super smart. I'm a doctor. I mean, I'm not,
Mhm.
and that's the thing is they don't prey on weak people. They prey on very, very smart people.
Mhm.
So here I am in this headspace again. And I'm like, what is wrong with me that I can't figure this out or recognize it? And I have a little bit of dating PTSD. I don't want to go out there again and repeat this because it's horrible. I mean, it's not just like, oh, it was a bad date or a bad relationship. It destroys you from the inside out. It
Mhm.
destroys your health. It destroys it's just everything about you. And you have to rebuild yourself brick by brick. I don't have the strength to do that again, nor should I have to.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing all that. And I think a lot of you listening can relate to this. And unfortunately, it's such a common thing. And you're right that PTSD that happens after a narcissistic relationship is like nothing else. It's hard to even explain to people, what happened. It's almost like coming out of a war in some ways. And like you said, you become almost hyper vigilant to signs and then you get scared and and so it's like now how do you navigate the waters moving forward, in fear of having that happen again. And it's unfortunate because sometimes these guys have different costumes on and there's different types, right? And but when you have them take the costume off, it's the same guy essentially. And so that's where you're left with. So I love that though you did a lot of work on this, and so what are you left with right now in ways of like what are you finding challenging about getting back out there and dating with all this?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is trusting myself because
Mhm.
the two things that I recognize in these relationships is the way that I felt kind of early on after the love bombing phase. I started to feel this creeping anxiety. And I thought, oh gosh, I just have an anxious attachment style, or that's just me. And what that was my alarm system going, hey, there's something wrong here. And so I'm trying to figure out how to delineate between, is it just some sort of little gremlin creeping up, or is it really my authentic self saying, hey, you need to take a step back and look at this. And that's where I get a little stuck trying to figure out what that feeling and what that voice actually is.
Yes. Okay, that's a really good distinction that you just said. Like what's a real state of anxiety where like you're seeing those pink flags in the beginning where you're like listening to yourself and the intuition versus just the anxiety from the PTSD. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, is this going to happen again? I see something. Oh my God, he just talked about himself. Forget it. Like that kind of thing. I know exactly what you're saying. Okay. So it's the trusting yourself. And tell me a little bit more about what you are doing in ways of dating. Like, are you back on the apps? Are you going out? Tell me about your social life.
So, not to use the COVID excuse, but I decided yeah, things were so crazy. Like I was getting ready for the Olympics, and I also
Mm.
didn't want something in my headspace because I'll tell you, after the last one, it took such a toll on my body. It took a year for my actual body to recover. So it cost me a lot in this
Mm.
trying to be a high level athlete and trying to, I mean, just having cortisol flooding through your body all the time just took a huge toll. So it took a long time for me to bounce back. So I did not date at all. I'm actually a year post breakup,
Oh, okay.
1 year, and I've only been on one date. I haven't actively sought out dating. So I'm in that space where I want to. And, in my heart of hearts, I know that there's a wonderful partner out there for me. And I kind of feel like I'm almost ready. And the funny thing is, I'm not scared of going on a date. That doesn't bother me. I used to
Okay.
be. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, because if I'm not attached to the outcome, I think that's the key right there. It's when I have to decide, gosh, is this person somebody I should be spending my time with? Or, I get
Mhm.
back up into my head about it. So dating life wise, I wanted to make sure I had good, healthy boundaries because I realized that if I'm dealing with narcissists, that I don't have boundaries for myself. And
Mhm.
that's something I had to really work on in this second round because I didn't pick that up between the first two. So I actually did go on a date a couple weeks ago. It was a real life date. I had met this guy a couple times on a bike ride. I had a chance to screen him a little bit, and this date ended very quickly. And so I was proud of myself because I was able to set a boundary. And it wasn't because he was a narcissist. He showed up stoned out of his skull. It was
Ah,
so
yeah.
bad. It was so
Mhm.
bad. So this person wasn't even present. And I'm kind of like, I'm not doing this. Plus, that's a big deal breaker for me right there. So there's all kinds of things that went wrong in the 45 minutes that I spent in this date. But I had enough wherewithal to go, there is no way that I want to spend time with this. And it's just not, I don't want to say that person's not worth my time because I feel like that's really mean. And as
Mhm.
an empath, I try to be compassionate towards where that other person might be in their journey because it's not without being judgmental. But at the same time, it's like, wait a minute, I'm not accepting responsibility for that person's behavior to show up drugged on a date.
Yes. Okay, so tell me more about this because this is where I want to get to a little more because obviously like again, we can't change these guys in the different costumes. I mean, they're walking all over the place, right? Like and
Yeah.
you're going to see them again, and it's just a matter of like you going at it a little bit differently this time around. So you just kind of said something that made me want to like question more about this. So you said you're an empath and you always like to like give people the benefit of the doubt and like look at
Yeah.
how does that play out for you when it comes to dating? Like are you the type of person who focuses more on the person and like their feelings and that kind of thing versus yourself?
I would say yes. And this being an empath, I identify as being an empath. I'm told I'm an empath. I also identify as an HSP, a highly sensitive person. And it's to me, it's the biggest curse and the biggest gift. It makes me a fantastic veterinarian. It also
Yeah.
is probably something that I have to protect and work on and cultivate in a positive manner so that I don't attract narcissists because that is probably the one character trait that they are massively attracted to. So,
Mhm.
yes, on a date, I try to make sure that it's not all about me and that that other person is having a good time and that because I feel like I'm talking about myself too much and then I'm like, oh god, they're going to think I'm a narcissist, so I get way up in my head about it. And I'm I'm in that space where I'm trying to listen to my body a little bit more, but then I cycle back to the oh gosh, I'm triggered and I don't understand where that trigger is coming from. And I think a lot of it is because I'm so sensitive and I'm more sensitive than most people. I pick up
Mhm.
on things that other people might not.
Yeah. And with that, do you then sometimes modify your own needs or wishes or desires and feelings to make the other person feel better?
Yes, and I would say I'm getting better at not doing that
Mhm.
and setting boundaries. And when I do that, I feel inauthentic and bitchy. So that's a
Yeah.
tough one for me. I feel like I'm being mean when I go no and I stick up for myself. It doesn't feel good.
And so when you're on a date and you say that sometimes you feel like you're talking about yourself too much and then you almost have to stop and like turn it back cuz it feels uncomfortable, like what exactly are you sharing that you feel is so much?
Um, I struggle with trying not to overshare
Mhm.
and also trying to be authentic.
Mm.
So, you're trying to get to know somebody on a date and I have all these I mean, I've had a really full life up until now and will continue to have one, I'm sure. And so people tend to get really curious about things like, wow, you were in the army, you were retired because you had an injury, because I don't want to lie to somebody and I'm disabled and I'm not it's hard for people to conceptualize that because I'm not in a wheelchair, I don't look disabled. And so they'll start to kind of go down that rabbit hole and there's a lot of vulnerable things to talk about in there. So on a first date, I will either get sucked into the the whole just slipstream of talking
Ah,
about that and that story, and I get really down into that story, and then I'm kind of like, wow, I don't want to share all this stuff up front. So I don't want to close the door on that person's curiosity, but at the same time I don't want to overshare. So that's one example I can think of, is, and some of it truly is somebody's being curious, and it depends on how they ask it too. If they ask in a really not so nice way, like, well, what's wrong with you, that's not coming from a place of curiosity. That's invalidating, and I usually shut those down really fast. If they say, hey, I hope it's okay if I ask this and you can tell me what you want to, that's more of a person who's trying to understand, seeking to understand. So I think it depends on where they're coming from and how they're asking it. Now the flip side to that is a narcissist is very, very good at being fake, having fake empathy.
yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, they draw you in because they're really trying to get ammunition. So they're not being they're
Correct.
this is something that I've learned too, because I'm trying to figure out how to identify, like, I feel like I can identify a narcissist 6 months into a relationship. I want to know in the first 5 minutes. I mean, can they just have
Yeah.
like an N on their head or something? That would be helpful. But
Actually, I can help you with that. Yeah,
that would be great.
definitely.
Anyway, but back to your question, because I went off on a tangent. Yes, I struggle with knowing where to share and what to share, and so, but without shutting that person down, and because now I'm in this place where I'm like, wow, I've almost swung the opposite direction, where instead of being overly empathic and wearing my heart on my sleeve, now I'm a little closed off.
That's
So I don't want to come
right.
off as emotionally unavailable, but maybe where I really am is more normalcy. I don't know, but I feel like I'm showing up as unavailable, and I don't want to be that way.
Yeah, yeah. I often call that the pendulum effect, right? Like, because
Yes.
you were one way before and that didn't work. So you're like, yeah, guarding against it all the way to the other side. And so it's somewhere in between. Absolutely. And I think it is hard after coming off of a PTSD type of situation, with two guys back to back too. So, I mean, also give yourself a break. Like it will take some time. And I definitely have ideas for you. I just want to peel away a little more of these layers because I think some of what you're sharing, I think we're kind of pinpointing to an area that would be really awesome for you to practice. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with. Like, what really is being vulnerable? Like, what is it to share about yourself, but with more levity and lightness and fun?
Yes.
Where it doesn't get too heavy too soon, too fast. And it sounds like that's what's happening with you. Like the narcissists, like you said, are really good at sucking you in that way. And then all of a sudden you end up in this like relationshipy, heavy type of interaction. And then yeah, you get caught up in it. And they like to know where you live. And once they know where your pain is, then they use that. Right. So if that's what your definition of being vulnerable and sharing is, I think it's like redefining what that's like upon first impression. Like you said, not 6 months in, but like just saying hi. Like, what is it like to be a little bit lighter and sharing things that have more of a feeling based share, but not like, let me tell you about my problems and my injuries. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
I
and
don't
I
want to talk
think,
about that on a first date.
right. And it's not that you're doing that on purpose. I just think because you're an empath and who you are, like it just ends up kind of going there sometimes. And so now, right, like you've gone maybe to the other side where you're just like a little bit guarded and more focused on them and asking good questions and being maybe a little more heady than that, also being in your body. Cause that was my next question. And I know just a little bit of history of you, like as you've been working on your femininity, because I mean, coming from the army, like you've been very structured, you're very analytical, you're in your head a lot. Like you even tipped your hat by saying, like, I have a PhD in narcissism, right? Like you know it all, Christina, right? Like, and while that's really helpful, it can also be your detriment, because that's really tough to try to like have the book in your head while you're sitting on a date. So I guess my other question is, how relaxed are you in your body? Like just being playful and flirting and having fun? Like, tell me about that.
So I've been practicing that. I've been traveling a lot. So I fly somewhere about once a month. I actually went to Belgium in May. So I was like, this is perfect. I get to interact with a whole bunch of people and,
Mhm.
no attachment to the outcome. Airports are a great laboratory for this kind of stuff. And it's harder now with a mask on. So you have to really rely on your body language and your eyes
Yeah.
and things. So, and the way you talk. So that's been an interesting experiment for me. So what I've noticed is if I connect with somebody, and man, woman, whatever, I try to practice um almost flirting in a little bit, maybe not in a sexual way, but just trying to just have fun and talk to that person and have an interaction. And it's really interesting because when I get up into that light, fun space,
Mhm.
um, lots and lots of people start coming over and talking to me. And I'm not a center of attention life of the party. I'm actually very introverted, but I've noticed energetically how much more fun that is. And it's kind of hard to explain because I'll feel like I'm in a higher vibrational energy. If I'm tired and I don't want to be bothered,
Mhm.
and I get really like kind of dark and energetically small, then my interactions with people aren't very pleasant. And that's goes
Mhm.
both ways because they're perceiving that I'm not very pleasant. And that's just where I am in that space and time. So for example, I was trying to board a flight yesterday and I was exhausted. I had just raced in the Olympic selection time trial and I just wanted to go home. And
Mm.
this man walks up to me and he's just pummeling me with questions. And I kind of just, he was actually being very narcissistic and he was talking a big game about himself and how he had trained for the Olympics long ago. And this guy definitely didn't fit the picture, but he wasn't asking me questions about me. And he went to great lengths to try and make me wrong about something. And I was
Mm.
kind of like, wow, I don't even want to deal with this. So instead of arguing with him, because that's my original go-to, I was like, hey, thank you. I'm going to go get on the plane now. And I walked away because
Awesome.
it was
Yeah.
awful. Like I was just
Yeah.
getting pounded by this guy and he would not leave me alone. And he was hell bent on making me wrong about something that he knows absolutely nothing about, which was kind of funny. So I was tired of being invalidated. And so
Right.
that's an example of me just going, you know what? There's nothing I can do to salvage the energy of this conversation because
Mhm.
he's not meeting me in the middle. And
Mhm.
I'm just going to walk away. I'm just going to make a choice to set a boundary and walk away. Yeah.
So that is like a beautiful example of where I want you to be. So, because I want to get to the like tools, something that you can
Yeah.
start using to help you crack the code of the narcissist from the minute you say hello, like you said. Like,
Okay.
I mean, and in lieu of having them have a big N on their hat, I mean, I think there are, I think there are some definite things that you can do. And I think, number one is your mindset. Like what just happened with that guy? If you can think of it, like I understand that you have a PhD in narcissism, and that's awesome. But I invite you to actually go back to kindergarten again and relearn how to date.
Okay.
Right? Like I think because you have so much knowledge and you're like you're getting in your head big time because you're so scared at the same time and it's a lot. Like it's and it can be overwhelming because you're very much trying to figure this thing out. I'm just giving you permission to just take a deep breath and relax, that you don't have to know the answers, but I think it's starting small. It's just like how in the army, I mean, there is no way that when you first join to be able to run 5 miles right away. Like if
Right.
someone has never run that length, that's ridiculous to expect someone to just wake up at 5 a.m. and okay, 5 miles, go. Like that person's going to fall down. Like they're going to get hurt. Instead, you wake up at 5 a.m. and say, today I am going to practice and I'm going to train by maybe doing a jog for a mile. And I think you have to think of your journey, your next chapter as that. And what kind of skills and things can you do in this mile run to help you so that you don't end up killing yourself again in the 5 mile, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. Yes.
I knew
Because
you'd
I
like
don't want to
that.
repeat this. Yeah, seriously. I don't I don't want to repeat this. And again, it's not just about being in some bad relationship. It's about having your health destroyed and just I mean everything. It's just I
But
just can't go through that again.
exactly. Well,
I want to go
and
through it
that's right. And that's why it's so overwhelming because you're so scared of all of that happening again and tripping and falling down and getting hurt right before the finish line, and
again. Yes.
it's just too much. And that fear will paralyze you. And then that's when you start, you know, kind of having your guard up. And what I invite you to do is with each mile, you pick like 3 skills that you want to work on and practice for your journey. And I
Okay.
think if you chunk it down, it's going to be a lot easier to digest. And also, it'll help you get to the finish line in a healthier way. So,
Okay.
I would say in your first mile, this is what I would have you do. You know, I'm like that. I'm giving you a diploma and in your PhD. That's great. Like, just put it on your shelf for now. And you can, you know what? You can frame it. That's great. Like we can walk
No,
to say,
I
and
actually
like,
don't want it.
oh, yay, you did it. You got it. Okay,
I kind
fine.
of don't want it. Can I shove it
Yeah.
in the desk drawer somewhere?
Yeah. Or even like put it under the bed. It's fine. Just know that you got it. Like you have the knowledge, like, because you said in the beginning what you really want help with is trusting yourself. Like just trust yourself that you have the knowledge. Now it's more focusing on the practice skills and the doing piece.
Okay.
And so what you just told me and what I'm hearing is that you really want to learn how to set boundaries and also kind of learn how to share and be vulnerable in a more light way so that it doesn't
Yes.
get so heavy and then you get to see who's listening to you.
Yes. That's perfect.
That's the thing is that you know not everybody who doesn't ask you about you is a narcissist. And this is the trap a lot of people fall into. Like, I'll have women come back, oh, he was such a narcissist. He didn't ask anything about me. I'm like, well, did you share anything about yourself? Well, no, because he didn't ask me. And I'm not saying that you do that, but maybe when you do share, you end up going down either a rabbit hole or you stay like really surfacey. So I want you to actually think of more feeling based stories to share. So, instead of going back to the army and your injury and all that jazz, it's more like, oh my gosh, can I tell you the funniest thing that just happened to me? And having your story be backed up with your feelings. I think that's another thing that I would love for you to work on because I know you've been doing a lot of feeling work, like you've been in therapy, but just how does that show up in real time on dates? It's not just describing a story in facts. This happened and then this happened and then this happened and seeing if he's listening. It's more of how does the story make you feel and see how he relates to that, how he listens to that.
Okay.
So I don't know. Do you understand? I can give you an example if this is just to
Yeah,
give
that
a
would be great.
distinction. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, and a common question maybe somebody asks, oh, where'd you go to school? For instance. And then, a factual story answer might be, I went to Yale University and I, practiced speech communication and math. I don't know. That's a weird combo. I don't know why I just thought of that. But you get my point. And so then maybe you'll tell a little bit of facts around your college, your experience, and what you studied. That is what I call a factual story. Instead, I want you working on an emotional based story where you're saying, I went to Yale University and I have to say, oh, it was the best time of my life. It was a time when I felt so free. I just absolutely loved college. And then you maybe back up a story of why.
Oh, okay.
Right. So what that does is it gives because no one really cares about the facts. It's people relate to people and how they make themselves feel and how you make the other people feel, right? It's a feeling that happens. But and I don't know in particular, but maybe you can feel into this as you go out on dates. I have a feeling either because you're an empath, you're so focused on their feelings and how the date is going and regulating that for yourself versus not really even caring how they feel, but more about you. This is how I feel. This is my story. And how am I feeling when I tell the story? How is he reacting to me?
Okay.
Does that make
I
sense?
think it does, absolutely. And I know that the challenge there is going to be, uh, and again, not to rely on my knowledge of narcissism here, but this is
Mhm.
something I've learned. A healthy person. So if you're, and you can tell me if I'm off base here, but if you are, kind of early date stage here, maybe 2 or 3 dates in, and you're telling a story that's a little heavy, and that person is your instantaneous, uh, compassionate, like, oh my gosh, they're the person that you wish you had when you were going through this experience. A healthy person will say, I don't think this person's ready to be in a relationship. A narcissist will use that, and they will become your biggest champion in an instant. And that's the trap that I fell into in this last one. And I'm kind of like, okay, so I like that idea of not getting into heady stuff.
Yeah.
At the same time, I want to be able to poke a little bit and figure out, because compassion and kindness and empathy are huge values of mine, and I want that in a partner.
Yes. So here's the distinction, because that's a really good question. And it gets hard for people to detect, because you're right. Like they'll make you feel like they're really listening to you. I guess what I'm saying to you is don't share anything heavy at first. I mean, sharing a fun experience at Yale University and just like
Yeah.
a story is way different than I hurt my back and this is what happened, you know? So
Yeah.
in the beginning, I want you just simply sharing, like, oh, I love broccoli and cheese, and it reminds me of my grandma's recipe, and blah, blah. Like, I want that kind of conversation and lightness.
Okay.
And then I want you to do some data dating, like, just really, you know, go out a couple times and keep recording for yourself. How am I feeling? How am I feeling? Is he listening? Is there reciprocity? Is there a balance? Because as you're sharing, then does he share his experiences? And there's this more like shared experience than lopsided. Because that's the thing I know in like a narcissistic type of situation is that if you really rewind and you go back to the beginning, it actually usually starts lopsided. Like either there's usually like more focus on them somehow, and then when you share, there's something either too much or it's deflected completely. Like it's like these extremes. A well balanced relationship, there's give and take in the beginning, and lots of sharing and kind of levity and laughter and like that. But I guess what I'm saying is to you is I don't even want you in boyfriend mode right now. Like don't go out with these guys saying, "Are you my boyfriend? Are you my boyfriend? Could you be the one? Could you be the like I just want you collecting data and really noticing the difference and even journaling after you come back from the date and saying, "Okay, how did I feel just now? What just happened? What am I reacting to?"
Okay. So, what would be a good way to set a boundary if somebody asks me about something that would require a heavy answer? For example, it's kind
Yeah.
of a loaded gun when I say, because I am a para athlete,
Yeah.
and somebody says, "Oh gosh, tell me about that." And how do I don't want to shut them
Yeah.
down and come off as unavailable or not wanting to share. Because I want them to be curious about those things. So, how do I set a boundary without pushing that
Going
person
there.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and without having to go there too. That's a really tough one for me.
No, that's a really good question. I mean, it's like anything else that people do. Look, we all have heaviness in some way, that, but yours, like you said, is a little more obvious that gets kind of brought out in the beginning. So let me ask you, how do you answer it?
Um, well, I usually try to give them I give them the story. So
Uh-huh.
that in the past, and the other thing too is I've been on ESPN, so this story is out there. I
Right.
mean, they can literally YouTube me and find me, and so that's when it's like, oh gosh, how do I talk about this? And so, and this last date that I went on, which again, I used as a practice date,
Uh-huh.
I thought that, what, this guy probably isn't my guy. I didn't know about the drug problem before I agreed to go on a date with him, but I thought, why don't I
Right.
this guy's asking me out. Why don't I go out there and see, it'll be a litmus test to see if I'm ready to date. So he asked me about that, like very early on. And again, he
Mhm.
wasn't in his right mind, but I said, that's a really long story and I would love to share it with you. I said, but let's save that. Let's get to know each other a little better first. So that was kind of, I don't know if that was great, but that's what came out.
Uh-huh. I like that. But I think you could even add more levity to it, like it not
Yes.
because that's still has a serious tone. Like, let's see if we can get to know each other and then I'll share it with you. I think it's
Yeah.
more like, oh, yeah, I get that question a lot. And I know it probably piques a lot of curiosity. And I definitely will share that at a time. But right now, I'm just so excited to be out and with you and having fun and would love to like hear more about like just fun stuff, and just make it kind
Okay.
of like, not that, and you're happy to share it. It's not that you're diverting it, but you're just so happy to be out on a date and just having fun. Like you just want to have fun. Like you're setting the tone for fun.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, because it does. And I got really triggered too when he asked me because I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about this. Like that's the thing they go to, not that's I think you know what that's it right there. Is that's what gets zeroed in on in the first 5 minutes. And I'm kind of like, well, why do you need to pick that out? Like out of all the things that make me me, why is that or I'm drawing focus to it in some way maybe, but I'm like, wow, that's where and that's, people are biased in different ways. So
Mhm.
it may be that that's what they can glom onto. I don't know. And again, it's a huge part of my daily life, right? Because I'm a career athlete. And that's what makes me an athlete and a para athlete. So that I just have to figure out how to sort of skirt around that and not draw attention to it. In a negative way, maybe.
Yeah, and I think it's more like, look, I just got off a like you could make fun of it too. Like I just got off of an interview in CNN. I don't feel like any more interviews if you don't mind. Just
Okay.
having kind of that attitude. I mean, look, it's like me being a dating coach. Here I going out and dating as a dating coach. Like, I mean, everybody has a label, right? Like, and it's how you lead with it. It's how you receive it, but it does set a tone for the rest of the date and everything. So I think that's another thing that you get to practice is like, okay, so when I divert it and try to make it a little more fun, what does he do? Does he get mad? Does he get like, stubborn and really drill into me that he needs to know the answers. Like, again, you get to see those red flags, like, awesome. And there it is, like, again, this is all about you. Like, really, this time around, I just want you getting a little selfish and
Okay.
really just seeing who shows up for you. And you are the queen bee and you're dating like queen bee. And it's your time to receive. You've been giving to all these guys and being an empath and analyzing everything to death. It's like, let's just breathe and be light and fun and let's see who gives to you back. And
I
anyone who
would love
doesn't, next. Okay, who's
it.
next on the playground? Who do I got? Who's next? Like and really like having more of that light attitude because I think with you so much heaviness around all of this is also kind of leaking, in the
Oh, absolutely.
right. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I hope that was helpful and makes sense. So, just number one is the mindset, keep it light and fun, really practice storytelling with more emotion, but in a light way, not in a heavy way. And just see who shows up for you, who gives back to you. How do you feel? Do you feel attended to? Do you feel respected? But you also have to allow the space to receive as well. So it is that kind of balancing act, but just focus on that mile. That's it. Like just do that. And then once you feel like you've honed in on some things and things start clicking, then you go to the next mile. Right. And that's where, like, obviously, like maybe more coaching comes in, or, you just have somebody holding you accountable in some way, or your
Yeah.
therapist, whatever. So that that is what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. I mean, at this point, I just need to get back out there. I need to get back
Yeah.
in the
And
game
practice.
because in
Exactly.
practice, yes. And for me, another pattern I have is I do the serial monogamy thing where I very quickly uh, get into a relationship and I date one guy and I know the typical
Don't do it.
advice don't do that is to get out there and have a pile of guys and you're dating them, you're not sleeping with them, you're dating them and you're data dating, but it's still a pattern I fall into. And so that's going to be for me when I go out and date, it's going to be with no attachment to the outcome and not in a like I'm using these guys kind of a way, but I'll screen them the best I can, and then also on these dates boundaries. So this last date that I went on was a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
because I was able to, in fact, my therapist asked me about, I told her about this and she said, well, when he said X, Y, and Z, how did you feel? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I was triggered and I was pissed off. He invalidated my profession because he asked me what I did for a living. And so I tried to talk about that. And because I'm very passionate about Chinese medicine. And I talked about that. And his response to that was terrible. It was, well, I can't imagine there's a market for that. I was like,
Oh,
oh, check, please. I literally was like looking for the server. I was like, I'm done. This date's over. Because if that's how you show up on day one, that's not going to get better. And old me would have been like, okay, well, he's just having a bad day, or
right.
he's nervous on the day, and I'm like, this dude just completely insulted me. And there were many instances of that in the very, the beginnings of this date. And I had ordered some food that I was like, yeah, I'm going to take that to go, please. And
Yeah.
it was awful. And that was the first time. I don't normally walk out on dates. And some people will say, oh, you should be nice to them and they're men and they have feelings. And I get that, but
Mhm.
not when somebody is insulting you or showing up stoned or any of that. I think you have the right. I have the right to say, no, I'm sorry. I don't want to spend time on this, because you only have so much time on the planet.
Well, that's awesome. And that's what I'm saying. Like, look at how you already are starting to detect things and set boundaries and like celebrate that and just keep doing that, in different
Right.
ways and seeing how you feel with each interaction. And I guess the other thing I will say is including like kind of the war stories, quote unquote. I would also include what you do for a living. I would not talk about what you do, your profession. Like you're having like all these heavy topics come out. Like, I mean, Christina, I know you. Like, you have your life is filled with adventure. Like, you have so many fun things you could share and
Sure.
stories and travel. Like focus on that, not with what you do and where you come from, but just who you are as a person and what makes you tick and happy. And I think if you really just focus on that and see who shows up, yeah, like just start there. And
Okay.
yeah, you're right. Like, don't get attached to this is your time to just date up a storm, do something different that time around. And it's not that you're using them. This is about you. It's not about them. Remember that. This is about you. This is what you
Okay.
need. This is your feelings and you go from there.
Okay. I appreciate it. And I'm terrified. I'm going to just say that I am scared to death to put myself back out there again, because again, I've had this spin cycle of repeating
Yep.
this pattern, and I can't believe it happened 2 times in a row. I still am dumbfounded by that. And that's in the past. I have to get over that story. But that is what I'm the most afraid of, is getting blindsided again and repeating that, and it just being stuck in that. So that is definitely where I am. I have some trepidation, and I have been a little reluctant to really go full bore into dating up a storm. And I want to. That's the thing. I want to, but part of me is like, ugh. And that's the part of me that's trying to be protective. That's the
Of
PTSD
course.
part, and
Of
that's
course.
normal. That's super normal. So one of the things I've been trying to do, and this is also hard, is I've been so outwardly focused on learning about narcissism. And one day I was like,
Mhm.
gosh, if I could turn all of that energy back towards myself
Yeah.
and understand, I'm like, wait a minute, why
Right.
don't I focus? I was like, why don't I focus all this energy on me and figure out how to be
Exactly. Yeah.
compassionate, and then that felt weird. And I'm like, oh, this is the crux of this whole thing. This is the empath crux. And it's funny because I just did it to myself. Like, wait a minute, I'm feeling bad about outwardly focusing energy when I should be focusing that on myself and my own self-care and self-compassion, so that I can show up in a very healthy way. And instead of this, I don't want to say codependent. I think there's a huge trap in that. And I read an article about this, and they were saying it's terrible to victim blame and say that you're automatically a codependent person because you
Mhm.
attracted a narcissist. And I've had to deal with some friends around this because they get into victim blaming mode and they don't
Yeah.
understand. They're trying to, if they've never had the experience, they don't understand the cognitive dissonance and the chemical changes that happen in your brain, things like that.
Yeah.
So I try not to get triggered. My friends are trying to be helpful, but that's something that I was reading about, because I just thought I was broken and I was codependent. I'm like, wait a minute. It's a fascinating article, and it's written by someone who does narcissistic abuse recovery. And she was talking about the fact that we are too quick to blame victims for that. And I thought, wow, okay, I've been focusing my energy in the wrong place. And she was talking about how victims become codependent because they're trauma bonded. So the trauma bonding actually creates the codependent behaviors, not the other way around. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a big aha for me, because
Mm.
I knew I was very healthy when I went into the second relationship, and I got torn down again. And again, I take responsibility for my piece in that relationship. And one of the things, several of the things I did, number one, I stayed too long. Number two, I was starting to get red flags at about a month in. And actually there
Mhm.
were probably red flags on day number one. I didn't pick those up, or pink flags, and pick those up. So that was kind of where I was like, okay, so I'm getting better at recognizing some of these things. But again, like we talked about in the pendulum, I'm
Yes.
I'm sort of in that space going, okay, there's something wrong with all of you.
Yes,
but
right,
so
right.
so
But
I do take
you
responsibility for my whatever part, and I'm still trying to identify some of those parts.
Yeah, and that's okay. But I guess like even like listening to yourself, like look at all the quotes you're quoting and all the articles you're reading, and like there's a lot there, and just trust yourself. You have the knowledge. It's okay to just kind of I think you should kind of put all of those articles and books on a shelf right now, because you got it. You already did that. And there's a lot of protection that goes around knowledge. That's why a lot of people will like listen to podcasts or watch videos, read things, and not do anything, because it's so much easier collecting knowledge than actually going back out there. And you said it is scary. So I think just, kind of putting down the books and just focus on the mile and collect your data, and then see where you're at the end of the mile. Then you go to
Okay.
the next one. Like, just don't worry about getting it right or wrong. Just worry about what's in front of you and training yourself in a different way. And it sounds like you know what that is. It's setting boundaries, it's sharing things that's lighter, being more in your body, having more levity, really checking in about yourself, saying no when something doesn't feel good. Like, just practice that. And then when you
Okay.
get better at that, then you go to the next thing. That's it.
Okay. I feel like I know. Thank you. I know this sounds so simple. I feel like I know what it is, like in my head, but I haven't figured out how to connect that to my heart and my body. So I
That's the
actually,
practice. Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
practice. Wow. So that was a big aha for me. Thank you. I'm like, wow, I have all this knowledge and I have to figure out how to apply it, but not in an overthinking and an academic kind of way.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Well, and even as you listen to this podcast back to yourself, like just listen to yourself talk. Cause I mean, I'm hearing it even on this call. Like I mean, you've done a lot of research, girl. Like you got it down, like, and so again, like, it's time to let that go and really just, kind of be more in your body now. And not so
well,
much pressure around everything, just
yes.
take your time. After a war, you can't jump back in the battlefield either. Like that's too scary. Like, really just ease into it. You got time, you got a therapist, you got friends, like, just ease into it. So
Thanks.
anyway, Christina,
Well,
thank you so much for coming on and sharing your vulnerability like you did. I mean, I think so many people listening to this can relate to your journey. And I think hopefully this was helpful for many.
thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me share. And yes, I hope this helps somebody else.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. And for those of you joining me today, this has been the Charisma Quotient. Of course, I am Kimmy Seltzer. And remember, you can build confidence and make connections, find love from the outside in. And if you want to know more, make sure you go to my site, as always, kimmyseltzer.com. And when listening to this, you realize that you would like to crack the code on how to stop attracting narcissists, hop on a free call with me, like I just did with Christina personally, by clicking on the link you see in the show notes to book it. And I will help you map out a plan in doing so. Also, I have an amazing 6-week class coming up in July called Get Your Sexy Back. And so, whether it's been a long time like Christina and you're just getting back out there, or maybe because of the pandemic, or you just need a refresh, whatever it is, I think this program would be amazing for you. It's interactive, it's fun, and it'll teach you how to look and feel attractive, desirable, and feminine so that you capture a man's interest no matter who you are with and where you go. And so if you are interested in attending, go to askkimmy.com, and just, throw me a note. You'll be in my community. and that you want to find out more about the class and getting on the priority list. And until then, remember, working on you is working on your love life. That's all for now.